guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, "Neighbor's kids repeatedly trespassed on my property and injured themselves. Mom wants to sue me." TLDR. School puts a bus stop right in front of my house and kids start hopping over my fence and messing around in my yard. It isn't safe and I call the school and bus to complain only to get nowhere. Finally, a kid twists his ankle jumping over my property and his mother shows up and threatens to sue me even though her kid was the one trespassing. I have video evidence that shows I'm in the right, so her lawyer stops contacting me. I call the school board and tell them the issue and they finally agree to do something about it since it is actually their responsibility. The bus stop gets moved to a safer spot and I am finally left alone in the mornings. The local school made a new bus pickup spot in front of my house. It technically was on the sidewalk in front and not on my property, so nothing right away was going on illegal. I had a small fence and gate. Honestly, I didn't think it would be a problem. The kids thought it would be funny while waiting for the bus to hop my fence and mess around on my front yard and fence. A few times they even thought it would be funny to do the old trick of ringing my doorbell and then sprinting back to the bus stop. I knew they were out there though, so I wasn't going to give them any satisfaction. I didn't want they are jumping my fence and messing around though, because I didn't want them to get hurt going onto my property. What I would have wanted to do was talk to the parents of these children, but I didn't recognize any of them and asking a kid where they lived was definitely a bad idea in my book. I tried going out and telling the kids that they had to stay off of my property because they were going to get hurt. I even put up a sign that said no trespassing. That sign ended up getting defaced a lot throughout this whole ordeal, from Sharpies all the way to raw eggs. They were probably about 13 or 14 and thought they were being super cool about it. It didn't work and they kept ending up on my property. I called the school and the bus company to try and get them to move the stop or talk to the kids. I got some generic answer that they would look into it and nothing. I even ended up calling the police non-emergent line to tell them and that I wasn't worried about the trespassing as much as them getting hurt on my property. It wasn't like I was going to arrest a bunch of kids for doing it, but I thought maybe a police officer could talk to them and let them know that trespassing was in fact illegal. My front yard wasn't exactly safe as I had a broken porch step and a few hidden holes that I am suspecting that were dug by moles. Not to mention the fence wasn't tall, but it wasn't short enough that the hop over was easy. They could land wrong and hurt themselves very easily. One day about 2 weeks later, no officer ever showed up by the way. One kid twisted his ankle hopping over the fence to get back to the bus stop so he wouldn't miss it. I know this because I set up cameras out there in case they actually did damage something or in my most paranoid scenario accuse me of something. I was 13 once and a lot of kids that age like to try blaming someone else for when they mess up. It probably happened to because later that day a very angry woman that looked just like how one would describe a Karen came up to my door and started punching on it instead of knocking normally or using the doorbell. Me. Can I help you? Woman. How dare you? You let my son and his friends play on your yard and now he twisted his ankle. Me. I didn't let anyone on my yard. If he is one of the kids from the bus stop, I asked them several times to stay off of my property and even put up a no trespassing sign. Woman. You liar. You invited my baby into your yard and then he got hurt. That makes you liable for his injuries and his mental anguish. I hope you like spending the rest of your life behind bars or living in a cardboard box. When I get done with you there will be nothing left of your life. Me. Ma'am, I have video footage of the kids hopping over my fence and audio of me asking them multiple times to stay off of it. Plus, phone records to the school and the non-emergent police that this has been occurring since school started. Woman. Fake tapes. I know what really happened because my boy would never lie to me. She left and I just decided that if she was going to sue me, I had plenty of evidence to defend myself. Right after that I checked the footage and saw exactly how he twisted his ankle as he rushed to get to the bus before it left. I know that getting taken to court by a Karen and embarrassing her is always a nice story to tell, but that didn't happen. I did get a notice from a lawyer who I then sent all my evidence and never heard back from him or the mother again. Still, the kid got hurt on my property and I wanted to do something to stop it from happening again. He wouldn't be the first kid to get hurt if this kept going, and I'm sure more protective Karen's moms were to follow. I debated making my fence taller or even calling the police for trespassing just to scare the living crap out of these kids. I spoke to my brother about this, and his suggestion was that I needed to call someone higher than the school or the bus company. I needed to take the matter straight to the school board because they were the ones that would actually make sure the kids were being spoken to about these things. I know the bus driver sees them on my property and just doesn't know it isn't their house or just doesn't care. I take his advice though and call the school board stating that I have a concern about the kids being in unsafe conditions waiting for the bus in the morning. I know that I exaggerated it a little bit, but I needed to get someone to actually speak to me, and those words worked like magic. I explained the situation, and it turns out that the bus stop was almost like an extension of the school, the same way the bus itself was. That meant the kids not only needed to follow all school rules at the bus stop, but if a kid got hurt, it was actually the school that would become liable, not me. A kid twisting his ankle was enough for them to get concerned because the school didn't want to be getting sued about it. The school also felt really embarrassed that they were getting a call like this about their students breaking the code of conduct and giving the school a bad reputation. I didn't want to tarnish them and again told them that the focus was really on keeping the kids safe. The day after that, the kids stopped jumping my fence and I guess got a good talking to from the school. A week later, the bus stop was moved a block away where the kids would be on a sidewalk outside of a park. This way, even if they were goofing off before the bus came, they were doing it both safe and legally. I'm just glad I have no angrier Karens at my door and no more kids potentially getting hurt on my lawn. The next story is titled, I got the police called on me for having handicapped plates when I wasn't disabled. Now before we go on, hold the hate for the full story. I lived 5 minutes away from work by bike, so that was my preferred method of travel. We only had one car and my wife worked 20 miles away, so naturally she would have the car. Rain didn't bother me since I had a good rainsuit, and snow wasn't a problem since we only got some when Mars aligned with Saturn, so biking was a 4-season activity for me. Not having a car came to bite me in the butt one day when the education center I worked at had an order from Walmart come in and someone needed to pick it up. As I wasn't doing anything at the time that was terribly important, the boss thought of me. I said that I didn't have a car and odds where it would be too big to carry on my bike. My coworker Danny offered me his truck and tossed me the keys. Problem solved. I was on my way. Now this was the holiday season and so parking was damn near non-existent. Danny had handicapped plates, but as I wasn't disabled myself, I looked for a legal to me space to park, even if it was out in the middle of no damn where. Now a common theme with Wally World Supercenters is that they're usually the store, a service road, and several satellite stores, usually fast food places. The only space available was quite literally the last space there was before I'd have to be crossing the service road and parking in Dunkin' Donuts. So, I get out of the truck and there she was. This was a decade before the Karen became a meme, so I just thought of her as nosy old bat. Knob for short. I like knob since it's pronounced the same as knob, which is a British euphemism for penis, and she sure was acting like a total dick. Now Knob saw my very much not disabled self getting out of the truck and ran up to me screeching like a handheld garden rake dragged across a chalkboard. She was hollering that I wasn't disabled, and I shouldn't be using those plates, and how it sickened her that people like me stole spaces from people who really needed them. I looked at the truck that's all but enjoying a cup of joe at DD, followed by the long and slow pan towards the handicapped spaces at the other end of the parking lot, and said, I don't see what the problem is. Showed her an ancient fertility hand gesture and toddled towards the store. Didn't think anything of it. I got the order and went back out to the truck. Knob was still out there, but she was now joined by one of Townsville's finest. Yes, this Knob had flagged down a passing police officer. An officer who was looking very much like he was wishing that he could have justification to tase her miserable, screeching butt. She saw me, raised her voice a few octaves. Dogs in a 5-mile radius must have been wondering, what the duck was that? And pointed me out to the officer. Now the officer looks at me with a look that clearly said, I already know the possible answer, but I'd not be doing my job if I didn't ask. I rolled my eyes and nodded with a look that said, yeah, I know. Do what you got to do. He asked to explain. I did so, saying that, my coworker is disabled, missing leg, and loaned me his truck. I'm not disabled, so I didn't park where I wasn't supposed to. Officer nodded and sent me on my merry way. I two-finger saluted him, smirked at Knob, got in the truck to the dulcet tones of her screeching that the officer's breeding was very questionable, his work ethic was in the toilet and many more epithets. And drove away. Don't know what happened to Knob after that, but I like to think that I upset her to the point where an A-type personality like hers wouldn't let it lie, and it made the rest of her day miserable because she lost. Ooh, wee lamb. The next story is titled, "So you want to make sure our shed is to code?" I love malicious compliance. Our neighbor reported our old, but sturdy, shed to the city for being too large without a permit. Inspector comes out, measures, nope, the shed is well under the size limits and doesn't need a permit. Husband starts asking questions about the rules and gets all the specifics on what is allowed. The shed is old and very basic, why not have a bigger, better shed? Oh, and by the way, the inspector knows the neighbor, she used to work in the planning department, knows the rules and clearly was just trying to make trouble. He looks into her property and says he can see a good half-dozen issues if we'd like to report them. We laugh, but nah, we're gonna go the malicious compliance route. We rip down the shed, hoping neighbor is smugly gloating to herself. We do nothing for 3 weeks, well, except draw up plans, buy material, lay the foundation and line up a couple construction friends to help. Then one Saturday our glorious big new shed goes up. Now we hadn't heard from this neighbor in the 3 weeks, but now she's asking about our new shed, she'd love to see inside if we don't mind. We did. Cue another inspection notice for building a granny flat, the shed, on our property. Obviously, the inspection goes fine. Well, except those violations on neighbor's property. That unpermitted open fire pit built right against the retaining wall and fence is a concern. We don't want it burning down our new shed. She's got a couple guys out there right now jackhammering out concrete. I think I'll go offer them some cold drinks from the mini fridge in the new shed. The next story is titled, "Typical Jerk Neighbors Complain About the Truck in My Yard. So, I replace it. I live in a mostly quiet neighborhood with lots of snowbirds and weekenders because of the proximity to a lake. The year-rounders are mostly retired, and people generally get along fine. A couple years ago, neighbors on one side built a new garage and driveway, moving their cars much closer to my existing forsythia hedge. I love the forsythia in the spring and basically let it grow however it likes so I can have the bright yellow flowers. Almost immediately they started complaining that the hedge blocked their view as they backed out of their driveway. In my state, neighbors have no right to a view extending over someone else's property, and our Supreme Court has repeatedly ruled that as long as trees and bushes do not actually impinge onto the roadway, property owners have no obligation to trim for visibility. I keep a 5-foot strip mowed between my hedge and the road, perfectly reasonable to my way of thinking. Since they have no recourse regarding hedges, they instead complain to county code enforcement about anything else they can think of. My brother parked his, licensed and insured, project truck on my property a while back because he was in the process of moving and needed a spot for it while he was figuring things out. In the meantime, he was in a bad accident in another vehicle and the truck has been sitting for over a year now. The license plate recently expired, and I got a letter from the county with threats of fines if it wasn't removed. Cue the malicious compliance. My brother decided to sell the truck for scrap and had it towed away this morning. This gave my neighbors their temporary victory as they observed from their deck, and nearly 6 inches of improved view from their driveway. At least until I moved my second vehicle, a 1960 Lincoln, which is about 2 feet longer than the truck, with current plates and insurance, into that place this afternoon. As a single person with more than one vehicle, I may get around to driving that old car at least once more before winter. The last story is entitled Neighbor Lets Aggressive Dog Roam Around the Apartment Complex. This didn't happen to me, but to my partner. All names are fake. So, I have an upstairs neighbor, Karen, who isn't really a nice person. The first words she ever spoke to me were to complain that I was standing on my stairs with one of my dogs. Anyways, yesterday my partner decided he wanted to tint the windows on his car. He noticed a stray dog outside and texted me to let me know to be careful if I have to take the dogs outside. Turns out the stray dog was actually Karen's dog. The dog tried to bite my partner's ankles multiple times, then proceeded to try and attack my nice neighbor's cat. We'll call her Hannah. After Hannah shooed the dog away, he proceeded to run up the steps to her upstairs neighbor who was outside with his pit bull. We all know who would have been blamed if the dogs were to start fighting. My partner, Hannah, and her upstairs neighbor were fed up with Karen and her aggressive dog, so the three of them went to her apartment to confront her. As soon as they told her that she should keep her dog on a leash and not let him roam by himself, she got defensive. She screamed, "Duck you! Get away from me and never come back here." She then proceeded to try and push Hannah down the stairs, but my partner and Hannah's neighbor stopped the altercation before it could get worse. About 10 minutes later, my partner was finally tinting the car window when he saw Karen's boyfriend walking up to Hannah, who was sitting on her porch, with the aggressive dog in tow. He told Hannah that he needs to leave Karen alone and stop harassing her. My partner walked over to them and mugged the neighbor, as he puts it. Karen's boyfriend got into his car with the dog and screamed at Hannah to leave her the duck alone and drove away. Hannah was shaken and close to crying, so my partner comforted her until she was okay enough to go back into her apartment. Thank you for listening.